Welcome to the Pursuing Points podcast, where it's all about the pursuit of credit card points and miles today so that you can travel the world free of charge tomorrow. And now, your host, Peter Foti.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the 23rd episode of the Pursuing Points podcast. I'm your host, as I've always been, Peter Foti. Welcome back. Last episode was in June. Obviously, every time I come out with a new episode, I talk about what my future schedule is going to look like in terms of recording these. Obviously, we don't really have a schedule. It's kind of whenever I feel like I have something worth talking about. And today happens to be one of those days. But before I get started, I do want to give a shout out to an avid listener. He's been listening to the podcast for a very long time. He comments on the website. He follows on Instagram. He and I have a lot of good discussions, and I really appreciate him as a follower of the podcast. His name is Neville Williams. And part of the reason I'm giving him a shout out is that he actually won an Instagram contest that I ran a few months back. So for those of you who don't remember, basically I posted a picture on Instagram of a credit card, which was, I sort of altered it so that it was tough to tell what card it was. And I basically said, if you can guess what card this is, I'll give you a $5 Starbucks gift card. He was correct. And I told him I would give him a shout out on the podcast, but I actually never did. So my apologies. That was back on June 10th. And the card at that point was the Marriott Premier Rewards card, which was both the last card that I signed up for on the podcast and the last card I signed up for, period. For those of you who didn't listen to that show, I would encourage you to do so. But basically the deal with that card was if you spent, I think it was $12,000 in a calendar year, your first 12 grand would be 10 points per dollar at a bonus level. I've pretty much wrapped up that sign-up bonus, which means that right now all of my spend none of my spend is going towards the sign-up bonus. So I'm obviously maximizing different categories. Mainly I'm using the Sapphire Reserve. I'm also using my Freedom Unlimited quite a bit. But I'm ready and open to try new cards and see what's out there. And so with that, I wrote some articles on the site, which I will link to in the show notes for this episode, about the Wells Fargo Propel American Express card. So this card came out not too long ago, and honestly, I'm pretty excited about it. So here's why. When you look at the card, right off the bat, given its earning structure, given its sign-up bonus, you would sort of expect that it would be a card which has, say, at least a $95 annual fee, right? In one of the articles that I wrote about it today, I compared it to things like the Chase Sapphire Preferred, the Citi Thank You Premier, etc. Now, as a product, I don't necessarily know if it's fair for me to compare it to those products because they do have that annual fee. But with the Wells Fargo Propel, basically, here's what you get. Right now, they have as of this recording, they've got a 30,000 point sign-up bonus after you spend $3,000 in the first 3 months. The points are worth a fixed value, 1 cent per point. So 3,000 points is $300. And of course, you'll actually end up with 33,000 points after you complete all of your minimum spend. Obviously, it'll be a little bit different if you get some bonus categories in there. The earning structure for the card, let me pull it up here because I am going to be applying at some point on this episode. So the earning structure for the card is that you earn 3 points per dollar for dining, which they call eating out and ordering in, gas, ride shares, which would be like Lyft and Uber, transit, which I take to mean things like the subway, flights, hotels, homestays, which I take to mean things like Airbnb, VRBO, etc., car rentals, and popular streaming services. So those popular streaming services are things like Hulu, Netflix, Apple Music, Spotify, SiriusXM Radio, etc. So 3 points per dollar on a whole host of categories, 1x on every other dollar that you spend. And again, there's no annual fee, right? So I don't necessarily know which cards I'm supposed to be comparing this to, and I'm not sure that there's a right or wrong answer, right? If it had a $95 annual fee, I would expect the sign-up bonus to be much larger, right? Or at least somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 points, which would put it sort of on par with like the Bank of America Premium Rewards, Chase Sapphire Preferred, etc. Because the annual fee is zero, I don't know if it's fair to do that, and instead I'm sort of more comparing it to cards like the Amex Magnet, which its sign-up bonus is $250, but you have to spend $7,500 in 12 months to fully unlock that bonus. That card earns 1.5x on every dollar, so very similar to like the Freedom Unlimited. And obviously the Freedom Unlimited is another card I can compare this to. So that's also 1.5x, and that is $150 sign-up bonus after you spend $500 in 3 months. And then lastly, a card I threw in here was the Uber Visa. The Uber Visa is actually a card that I don't really have any trouble recommending to people. I actually think it's sort of an interesting product. So on that one, you're going to get 4% on dining, which is restaurants, takeouts, bars, and Uber Eats. 3% on hotel and airfare, which includes vacation home rentals. 2% for all online purchases. So that's like Uber, online shopping, music streaming, etc., and 1% on everything else. So this card, when I say the Uber card, has a really good earning structure, but the sign-up bonus is only $100 after you spend $500. It does have some interesting ancillary benefits, like they give you a $50 subscription credit, but you have to spend $5,000 in a year, so that just doesn't seem worth it to me. They do offer phone insurance. So on the Uber website, they say you get up to $600 for mobile phone damage or theft when you pay your mobile phone bill using your card. And interestingly enough, so does the Wells Fargo Propel card, which is actually one of the reasons I'm considering signing up for it today. So what that basically means is that if you pay your phone bill in full using this Propel credit card, your phone or the phones on your plan are covered from damage or theft up to $600 per claim, and it's up to $1,200 per year. And each claim, I think, is subject to a $25 deductible. And note, this doesn't include lost items. So if you lose your phone, even if you have this protection, they can't help you. But everything else would be covered. And so for me, when I look at a new card, right, and I'm thinking about, is this something that I'm interested in applying for? I look at a number of things, right? First and foremost, for all new products, we want to look at the sign-up bonus. Does the card offer enough for me to give up a hard inquiry on my credit report, and then for me to give up spending on one of my other cards to unlock this bonus, right? So in other words, the opportunity cost, right? For every dollar that I spend on the Wells Fargo Propel, I'm not going to spend $1 on the Chase Sapphire Reserve. Is that worth it for me? So in my opinion, when it comes to the sign-up bonus for this card, and again, this is a little tough because $300 is not a lot, but it is a lot when there's no annual fee, right? Like, I won't feel any pressure to have to call and cancel this card in a year like I would with some other products, right? Like, for instance, the Bank of America Premium Rewards card, which I signed up for on the show, that card is $95 annual fee, and the only reason I still have it in my wallet is that they give you a $100 credit every year for things like seat upgrades. And you can also use it for like baggage fees and whatnot, but I use it for that, meaning effectively I get a net gain of $5 a year. It's not to say that I'll never cancel it, because that in and of itself isn't a great value proposition, but it's enough for me to keep it for now. With this card, I don't even have to make that decision. Because there's no annual fee, I just get $300 for spending money I probably would have spent otherwise, right? And so I would say we check that box. The second is the card something that's valuable to you after you unlock the bonus, right? So with the Bank of America Premium Rewards, I would say no, right? None of its earning categories were really of interest to me. I could out-earn it on other products. And then, you look at cards like the Marriott which I recently unlocked the bonus for. Those really aren't cards that once you unlock the bonus, you can kind of go back to the well for, right? Unless you're someone who travels, or at least in the case of, say, a Marriott type card, if you're staying in a lot of Marriotts and you can earn on the bonus on property, that's fantastic, but that's not something that I do often, right? If you recall, the reason I signed up for that card was so that I could transfer those points to SPG and then redeem them for SPG moments. As an aside, I don't know what's happening with the SPG moments program now that they've merged with Marriott. My hope is that it will stay and that the value will be relatively similar, but that sort of remains to be seen. I don't actually know. But once I do, I'm sure I will talk with you all about it. So, will we keep this card in our wallet after we meet the minimum spend? Yes, for two reasons. One, the family AT&T bill will go on this card every month, right? So all of our phones will now be covered with this coverage, and I can cancel any existing coverage. So that's a reason to keep it. And two, because it earns 3x on streaming services, I can put my Netflix and my family Spotify subscription on this card. Just those two things alone, I'll earn, say, $9 a year or something like that, maybe $10 a year, and I don't have to do anything, right? So these are smaller numbers, but I'm looking at it as, it's pure profit, right? Because there is no annual fee, so without that, I don't really have to do any real math, right? I get $10 a year for my bonus on the streaming services. I get free cell phone protection, which is a little bit of peace of mind, and I can save money on any coverage I've already got. And then I'll bank the $330 some odd that I'll get for unlocking the bonus, which, that's nothing to sneeze at, of course. As far as some other minor details, APR, so they get 0% introductory APR for 12 months for both purchases and balance transfers. The rates go up to between 14 and 27% thereafter. I mention that simply because I want to be complete in my analysis, but truly, if you find yourself spending money on credit card interest, I would say stop and sort of reevaluate. This is not a hobby that you can get very far in if you find yourself behind on any of your bills. Any benefits you thought you were earning from the points and the miles will very quickly be eradicated by the interest that you're paying. So bear that in mind. If you're in sort of a pinch and you want to transfer a balance of this card to take advantage of the 0% APR because you're confident you'll be able to pay it off within 12 months, by all means, that's just what I wanted to call out. What else? Obviously, from like a redemption standpoint, like I said, the points are worth a fixed rate of 1 cent per point. Wells Fargo has this idea of the Go Far Rewards program, which is basically the portal through which you redeem your points. It's pretty basic, right? You can redeem for travel 1 cent a point, cash back, merchandise, online auctions, things like that. Where things do get somewhat interesting is that with Wells Fargo, you can actually combine your point balances across cards. So, for instance, if you have the Wells Fargo Visa, you can actually combine the points from this card to that one, and on that card, you actually get a 50% bonus when you redeem your Go Far points for travel. That card doesn't have an annual fee either, which means that as a stack, right, the Propel plus the Visa Signature, that's pretty good for no annual fee, right? You get 3x on a ton of categories. You can combine points for a 50% bonus, so you're really earning 4.5x on everything. And there's no annual fee, right? And I know I've said the no annual fee thing like 20 times already. When I wrote the article, I felt like I was repeating myself, but I just think it's super important to call out because it's part of what makes this card so valuable. You get all of this stuff for free, which is super compelling, at least for me. I don't have the Wells Fargo Visa Signature. In fact, I don't have, nor have I ever had a Wells Fargo product or even bank account for that matter. So when I signed up for this card today, if I'm approved, this will be the first Wells Fargo product I've ever had. So before I go through with the application process, I want to touch on one thing, and then I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. So the one thing I want to touch on, and I'm actually thinking about doing an entire podcast episode about this, and I just touched on it, right, is this idea of stacking, which is having multiple products from the same financial institution and then combining their benefits. It seems very obvious to me that like the goal, and of course, when you say this out loud, it sounds super simple, right? Or it sounds obvious. But these financial institutions, of course, they want you within their, ecosystem, right? So, for instance, we talk about this a lot with like iPhones versus Google or Android phones, right? In 2018, the phone itself, from like a hardware perspective, is very similar. The software is relatively similar. The big difference is the ecosystem, right? Are you going to store your photos on Google Drive or iCloud? Are you going to buy your music from iTunes or Google Music? And generally, wherever you're going to do one, you're going to do the other. The goal with the banks is to do something very similar, right? Chase wants you to have the Freedom Unlimited and the Sapphire, either Preferred or Reserve, and maybe the Freedom. Wells Fargo wants you to have multiple products. Of course, American Express with membership rewards, if you have cards which earn those, you can combine those balances. And this spans multiple, obviously, financial institutions. That's something I just want to put that out there. I want you to get that in your mind and just think about it a little bit. I'm planning on doing some more content around this idea of stacking. Because what's interesting is that the competition in the marketplace right now for credit cards is so intense that companies like Wells Fargo, who historically haven't done much in like the points and rewards realm, generally when you hear people talk about the space, Chase and American Express are like the top of the heap. And of course, American Express is sort of interesting, right? Because they're a processor, but they also have their own products. Anyway, rambling a bit. Bottom line is, keep that in mind. Think about it. Send me your questions, comments about stacking. I want to hear what you think. For me, I think it's a super interesting concept, and I could totally see myself going for like the Wells Fargo Visa Signature to try to get that 50% bonus. The one problem is that Wells Fargo has a pretty annoying sign-up bonus policy. So their sign-up bonus policy is that if you've opened a Wells Fargo credit card within the last 15 months from the date of this application and you received an introductory, a sign-up bonus, you cannot qualify for another one, even if you close that other account. So effectively, if I submit this application today, I can't get another Wells Fargo sign-up bonus for 15 months. That's kind of lame. Obviously Chase has 524. American Express, honestly, American Express is maybe worse because you can only get it once per lifetime per product. And someday I'll probably talk about all those different rules and regulations. I don't think they come into play for everybody. I think it's, those rules were born out of people who were abusing the system to some degree. Back when the U.S. Airways MasterCard, people had a dozen of those at a time, and they would just keep getting the 40,000 point sign-up bonus. Stuff like that is what leads to rules like this, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. So at least for now, this will be my only Wells Fargo product. But given how the economy around these cards is evolving, it wouldn't surprise me to continue to see really, really great products come out, but you can only fully realize all their benefits if you have other products with the same company. And so that's going to be an interesting thing to see evolve over time. So before we submit the application, I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. So I posted on Instagram a couple days ago. If you don't follow me, please do, at Pursuing Points. And I posted a screenshot of my Delta Platinum Amex. I recently met the $25,000 requirement so that I earned 10,000 MQMs plus 10,000 bonus SkyMiles. So for a little bit of history, I originally got that card back when I was traveling Delta a lot, and I was also just traveling a lot, period. At the time, I was living in North Carolina. My company's headquarters were in Los Angeles, so at least once a quarter I was back and forth. And the first year I was there, I earned platinum status between spend on the card plus all that travel, which was really great. You know, every flight I was on, I was getting upgraded, and I really enjoyed it. But of course, over time and as I switched jobs and I moved cities, travel habits change, patterns change, everything's changing. So I'm not traveling as much, but even when I do travel, I'm still sitting in first, generally because I'm choosing to pay to upgrade with either points or cash, just because I don't want to risk waiting for an upgrade. So for instance, the other day, 2 weeks ago or so, I flew to LA and I had a lay flat seat, which was their Delta One product. It was actually the first time I've ever flown from East Coast to West Coast in a lie flat seat, and it actually made the experience obviously much, much better. I took a red eye from LA back to New York. I was able to sleep pretty much the whole time. Every other time I've done a red eye from LA back to the East Coast, I've not had a lay flat bed, and I've never gotten to sleep, and the next day is just terrible. It's somewhat tangential to the primary topic here, but I just want to throw that out there. So bottom line, my travel habits are changing. I don't necessarily see as much value in the Delta Platinum Amex as I have in years past. This year, I did secure silver status. I will not get gold status, which basically means that moving forward, I don't have to be tied to Delta. I can choose where I want to fly or on who I want to fly without having to worry about status or anything like that. You know, in most cases, I will pay for an upgrade with either points or miles, and I don't expect the lack of status to affect me all that much. And so for that reason, with the Delta Platinum Amex, what I'm most certainly going to do, and I may do this on a podcast, I may not, we'll see. I'm going to call for a retention bonus. I'll see what they offer, if they offer anything. If they offer nothing, chances are I'm going to cancel the card. It has a $195 annual fee, and I can no longer justify that, right? So part of the idea of the podcast, right, is, you know, first of all, I don't know everything. But as I'm talking through things, I think it could be helpful for other people, right? So this is sort of the thought process that I go through when I'm deciding, do I want to keep this product? Do I want to sign up for this other product? And those sorts of things. So for me, the SkyMiles card, unless they can offer a retention bonus that's going to sweeten the pot a little bit, I don't necessarily see myself keeping it. Other cards that I'm considering in addition to this Wells Fargo Propel card are the Amex Platinum, the Barclay Arrival Plus, which recently got a new sign-up bonus. The Uber Visa is interesting, although I don't necessarily know how much value I would see out of it because you can't redeem the points for travel, and the sign-up bonus is kind of lame. The SPG Luxury card is slated to come out in August, so that should be coming out any day now. Depending on what the sign-up bonuses for that card, I might consider it, but we'll see. And so basically, I'm just trying to keep my options open, right? I certainly am not hungry for points. I don't know if that's the right word, but like I'm not in a situation where like I desperately need points, right? I have plenty of points on multiple platforms. So for me, what's more important than just having a card that I'm trying to hit a sign-up bonus on at all times is making sure that I always have enough hard inquiries in my back pocket so that when that next great offer comes around, it's like no questions asked. I can just submit the application and be done with it, right? So the last application I submitted was for the Marriott card. My credit score is very good right now. If I were going to submit an application for a card at, say, Chase, one of the things that I would do prior to that is make sure I zero out all my balances. The reason for that is not because it's going to affect your credit score right away, even though it will over time. But if I get an indeterminate decision, meaning like they don't say yes, they don't say no, they want to just wait, almost certainly what I'll do is call them up and ask if there's any additional information that they need from me. And when I do that, I want to have as much leverage as possible. So if I have an outstanding balance, they could look at that and say, why are you asking us for more credit when you already owe us money on the credit we've given you? So that's sort of an aside. Whenever I sign up for a new product, I try to zero out all my balances that I have with that particular bank. In the case of Wells Fargo, I don't have any balances to zero out. I've checked my credit score. Everything looks good. I'm happy with the sign-up bonus. I'm happy with the earnings category. So I feel comfortable submitting this application. So I'm just going on the general website, right? wellsfargo.com. I search for the card. I am entering all of my information. So one of the things that happened when I signed up for the Marriott card is that I got waitlisted because I had just moved to New York and they, I guess, couldn't verify my address. I'm hoping that that doesn't happen again. Hoping now that it's 8 months later, we're kind of all set, but you never really know. So this is all pretty typical information. The first page of the application is just, first name, last name, social, etc. Mother's maiden name, continue. So the second step of the application is income. So they want to know, what is your housing status? I rent. Are you employed? Yes. And they're going to ask about your occupation. Who do you work for? How long have you been there? Business phone number. Man, I have no idea. Do you have any additional income sources? I'm going to say no for all of this. No. Continue. I'm going to keep this application pretty simple. I don't think I will have any trouble getting approved, but of course you never know. So I'm going to hit continue. And apparently they do need a business phone number. This is really interesting. I have no idea what phone number I would use, but I'm going to go to our company's website and see if there's a phone number on here I can use. I suppose I'll just give the generic 1-800 number, right? I mean, if they call, they call, but I don't really foresee that happening. Okay, so I gave him a business phone number. Let's see if that helps. Card options. Do you want to add an authorized user? Yes, I do. Also, I apologize. The typing is probably a little bit loud. I have what's called a mechanical keyboard. So it is a little bit loud, but I hope it's worth it. All right, so fourth step of the application process, review all of your information, address, date of birth, phone number, email, social security number, income, blah, 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 blah. I added an authorized user. So now is your opportunity to review the terms of service as well as other card terms and conditions. So again, no APR, although we're not concerned about that, no annual fee. All right. I understand that by clicking submit, I certify that all information is true and correct. Drum roll. So the application has been submitted. One moment, please. This is always, I can still remember the time that I submitted the application for the American Express Platinum card, and I was like 19, and I didn't have any money, and I certainly couldn't afford the annual fee. And I got this feeling when I submitted the application. I was so nervous. And of course, for that card, I ended up getting approved, which was gut-wrenching because I couldn't afford the card. It was just a total disaster. I think I've talked about it on the podcast. But anyway, we were approved. So that's exciting. The credit line is kind of lame, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. I'm not super concerned about it. My strategy has always been to pay off cards, if not daily, generally weekly. And that's what's worked for me. I mean, I've been doing that since I got my first card when I was around, say, 18 or 19. Of course, it wasn't the Platinum, but it was a card. So your new card will be mailed to you in 5 to 7 business days. Fantastic. So basically at this point, I'm at a point with my wallet where it's time for me to seriously consider doing some spring cleaning. I have like 4 or 5 cards that I don't use. I have no intention of using, and they really don't provide me with any value. So stay tuned to the future podcast where I will go over those products. Maybe I don't think I'll call and do a retention offer live on the podcast, but certainly I will do a podcast around the retention offers that I'm seeking. So once I get this card, I'll post about it on Instagram and Twitter. If you guys have any questions about this, or you're thinking about getting the card as well, I'd love if you reach out. You can email me. You can follow me on social, what have you. This podcast was a little bit long. I think it's our first show over 30 minutes, actually. So thank you for sticking with me. I'm glad we got approved. And I'm excited to do another episode about spring cleaning and figuring out sort of the architecture of my wallet, if you will, moving forward into the rest of 2018 and then, of course, 2019. So thank you for listening. Thank you again. Shout out Neville for being a continued listener and supporter, and I will see you all soon.